this live stream. I am your host, Paul Roberts. I'm the director of editorial and content here at Reversing Labs. I'm really happy to have with me Joshua Knox, our senior cybersecurity strategist. And Knox, we're here to just kind of talk about current events, some of the cyber news of the week that we put out weekly in our newsletter Chainmail that goes out on LinkedIn. If you're not a subscriber, we'll throw the link into the chat and you can subscribe. Chainmail, there it is. Yeah. This is like, we send this out every Friday, and basically we use it as a way to wrap up some of the interesting software supply chain news of the week. And so that's what we're going to do today. Knox, say hi.
Hey, how's it going? I'm excited to be here. Always fun to talk about security news.
Absolutely. So the big story this week, Knox, was in Chainmail, was this story that came out on a pretty large campaign of, I guess you could call these, it's a form of typo squatting, but not really. It's what we call revival hijack, where these malicious actors are looking at projects, open source projects that have just been abandoned, so the name is no longer being used.
Yeah.
And they basically resurrect that name with the goal of circulating malicious content. So this is something that we've documented before, but it's a new campaign or an expanded campaign. Hacker News wrote about it. This was found by researchers at JFrog. What should folks know about this?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because typo squatting is always a problem, and it's there's always problems with Python packages, right? Whether it's in the past, we always talk about packages that have been abandoned and they still exist, right? Like it's still out there, but nobody's worked on it for like 2 years. And so then some bad guy is able to get control of that repo and start, reviving it and updating it with bad things. In this case, the developer is trying to do the right thing and is trying to remove the package completely, because that's, in their mind, they're probably thinking that's the right thing to do. I'm not maintaining it anymore, or there's another better package. I should just remove the whole package so that people can't get it. Well, obviously the bad guys have found a flaw in the way that PyPy, it's not a flaw, it's a feature, right? The feature is that when I remove a package completely, I can reuse the name. That's a feature. But it's a bad feature, because now if I have a requirements.txt, if I have just a file that says import whatever module, I'm just going to import it, and I'm going to think that I'm getting my trusted one I used maybe for years, and now I'm not, because it's been replaced with this one from who knows where. So it makes me wonder if PyPy will rethink this now that this research has come out. If PyPy will maybe reserve the name. I mean, you hate to do that because you're losing real estate, right? It makes it harder to name things, and naming is already hard enough. But it feels like even if that developer removes it, maybe they need to consider whether they have to reserve that name and not let that happen.
There's no shortage of potential package names, project names out there, right? So while it would seem to, you're foreclosing on somebody else using that name, the downside of allowing name reuse is what we're seeing, right? Which is the most kind of ham-fisted, crude attack. They could just throw malicious code up on, that project name, and it would just break everything that has it as a dependency. A more sophisticated actor, though, right, would probably reproduce the code that got deleted, right, but add malicious functionality to it. So it won't break it, but you'll be getting these backdoors and whatever else, info stealers or whatever.
And by the way, before we move on, one of the other things that I read recently was Hugging Face, and it was another typo squatting like this, where it's not really typo squatting, but Hugging Face will just allow you to use whatever name you want for an organization, and you don't have to prove it. I can say I'm Netflix, and create a Netflix organization on Hugging Face, and it's optional whether I want to, verify who I am. So anybody can. So you can't. The moral of the story with all of these things is just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. If it says just because it has a name.
Hold on a second, Knox. Let's not get carried away.
But we gotta do our investigation, and we can't just blindly download things.
Yeah. I mean, this is a problem that we've been living with for literally like decades with the web, right? I mean, we've known for a long time that, yeah, malicious actors will go and set up subdomains that make their links look like a legitimate company, or typo squat on, common domain names, whether it's Microsoft or Apple or, JP Morgan or Bank of America or whatever. This has been a part of phishing attacks and for a really long time. What's really interesting, and this is just parallel to what we're seeing in a broader context, is we're now seeing it really affect the development space and development infrastructure around these popular package names. So really interesting kind of twist on that longstanding problem. It would seem like maybe we need just more defined kind of branding or domain control out there. The other really interesting story that came out, and this dropped from Orca Security, we just squeezed it into our chainmail newsletter this year this week because it dropped late last week, was around GitHub Actions and typo squatting around GitHub Actions, which is something that never occurred to me as a possible attack vector. But Orca did this as a proof of concept. So this isn't in a while. This was something that they theorized and then showed, hey, look, we can do it. Where they set up these, again, domains that typo squatted on common action, GitHub action names or words, and were able to use those to take advantage of, again, developers who just fat-fingered something. And again, as often is the point of typo squatting, they had, malicious code there ready to get pulled. Had this attack vector ever occurred to you?
No, not exactly like this. And, as I think about it more, how many times have all of us tried to type in a web address just in the address bar of your web browser, and you fat finger it and you put in the wrong address and you hit enter and you go to some flaky weird site and you're like, whoa, what did I just do? I typed in the wrong thing. I remember for a while, I feel like I would tell way back in the day when I was doing some desktop support, I would just tell people, just type it into Google, search it in Google, and then click on it from Google. And even that's not always safe. But my point is that way they weren't trying to just type something into an address bar and hit enter and go to some crazy site because they fat fingered it. And I think what we're seeing here is that developers are doing the same thing. URLs are hard. So when you're creating your scripts, they're typing into the script for GitHub Actions, and they've fat fingered an address. And so what these guys, they're doing the exact same thing that we see with websites, where they just try to make a website off and they hope that you hit it. Or even older, I feel like, is 1-800 numbers. There even used to be phishing with 1-800 numbers where scam companies would try to get one number off or a diagonal off from another well-known 800 number just to get people to call the wrong number. So in that sense, it's one of those tried and true vectors. People making a mistake in the spelling or whatever. They've just found a new entry point to do that, which is here on GitHub Actions, and it's in those scripts that these developers are writing, and they're just accidentally typing the wrong thing. You would hope, if they've got Copilot or they've got some other things, that it might help them see some of these things. But I feel like I don't know, maybe that's got to be another test, right? URL verification before you run it. Oh, I'm losing you, Paul.
Yeah, because I
there we go.
On.
Now you're back.
Yeah, right. It's 2024, Paul. Come on. Come on. So what they did was they set up 14 different repos with names like Google GitHub
Yeah.
Actons, so actions minus the I. And then they had another one called like Docker Actions, Docker Action.
Acton.
They
They
had one
did
called
Acton or
Actons. Yep.
yeah.
Actons, right?
Yep.
And then they just kind of waited. They forked them and they waited for developers to start calling them. And actually, it's really scary. In the project, Orca saw 12 public repositories referencing the typo squatted Actons repo, right? Demonstrating how easily they can fall victim to this type of thing. And after 3 months, GitHub had only flagged one of the fake organizations, which was Circle CI.
And you know what's funny is, at least with like my illustration, if you fat finger the website on your browser, you know instantly because you went to the wrong website. With a developer, you put the wrong one in, and your script runs. And the way you know whether it failed or not is you're looking at the little, you're looking at the log, and it ran. So I'm fine. And you go about your day, and actually you sent your action to a bad place.
And then again, once again, with a modicum of preparation, you can make sure that, again, what they're actually accessing, the majority of the code that they think they're accessing is similar to what they, right? You can copy from the repo that you're impersonating, and try and make sure that you don't break stuff. Because breaking stuff is one way you're going to get discovered.
I think it's also important to point out here, these are everything we've talked about today has involved some kind of typo squatting, and is some kind of, which is almost a form of phishing. And I do feel like the bad guys have figured out that why would I want to phish one person when I could phish a developer and reach hundreds of people through their application? So I feel like they're starting to realize that is almost a better route, right? I get better returns. It might be a little more work, but I get better returns if I can get onto one of these projects or pop a developer that is getting their, whatever they're producing further. Give me wider approach here.
I think it also reflects a recognition on the part of malicious actors that developers are harried and busy and rushing to get stuff completed, get projects written, get code submitted, and are there highly susceptible to not looking carefully, like, oh, I missed the I in actions, and these are all predicated on that. I think to that kind of cues up the last news item from our most recent chainmail I want to talk about, which is that Microsoft is reevaluating how it's training its developers around supply chain risk, and getting them to be more familiar with and mindful of kind of threat intelligence as part of their secure development, mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when I think about that. It sounds right. On the other hand, when I try and kind of connect the dots, so like, well, how actually would, kind of being well steeped in threat intelligence help you in terms of preventing, bad code or secure development issues? I'm not sure I get it, but talk to me. What do you think?
So, I mean, I do kind of get it in a way. So I went through a really heavy phase, and I've been starting to get back into it because it's fun. And that is of doing a lot of CTFs, right? A lot of capture the flag boxes, your try hack me, your hack the box, and things like that. And there are several of the boxes that you work through, and you learn about different things that you've never thought of before. Poisoning a host file, having a script that runs as root, but allowing write access to the script. Like if a developer has never thought these things through, if they've never thought about, oh, I have to give this script root permission, but then they also just leave it wide open so the next person who comes behind them could modify it and put whatever they want in the script. If they've never thought about those things, then that's bad. So I agree. I think it's very important that we talk about these guys are not going to be, pulling out Wireshark and doing a bunch of packet sniffing, right? That's not what they should be doing as a developer. But there are things around permissions and around how we handle file transfer and around how we just allow different things that they've just probably never thought about before,
Right.
and they've just never thought that, oh, someone could use that in a bad way. So I think
Right.
I think that's what they need to be teaching them.
And it sounds like what Microsoft is doing is sort of sitting down with them and saying, listen, let's talk about Volt Typhoon. Let's talk about these malicious actors and what their campaigns against us have looked like. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
understand what these campaigns look like and have that in the back of your head, then as you're, again, working on your project, working towards your deliverable, you might start to sort of say, oh yeah, that, I gotta be more sensitive around these particular
Yeah.
areas because I know that this is where the malicious adversaries are going to look, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to push back the deliverable date a couple days so that we can just make sure that this is tight.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was going to say. Our whole fail faster development cycle and ship fast, right?
Right,
Like
right.
I get it, right? I understand the whole minimum viable product. I know you've got to ship fast, but at the same time, it's not at the risk of just destroying your application or making yourself completely vulnerable.
And it that mindset, of course, kind of obscures or kind of ignores the downstream impacts of failing fast, right? It
Yeah.
would be like, again, if the, you know, sausage factory said, like, well, if we can't, if you make us check the quality of the meat, we're not going to be able to produce 75,000 sausages a day. We're only, and it's like, well, that's okay. It's okay. We'll take fewer sausages that don't send us to the hospital, and it's sort of the same concept for, consumers, for the enterprises and, public sector, private sector organizations that consume the software to say, it's okay, take longer, but make sure there's not an RCE.
I think there's a difference between, and we're at the danger of keeping this illustration going. There's a difference between, like worrying about something in the sausage and like maybe maybe a tiny misprint on the packaging or something, right?
That's
like
right.
The misprint on the packaging is an annoyance, but the sausage itself is fine. It's the same thing with the developer. If a little UI problem happens because you push some UI thing and it messed up, but if you push something and everybody's data gets exposed, there's a difference, right? And so there has to be some wisdom, some thoughtfulness about which features are being shipped quickly and what the safeguards around them should be.
Okay, final question, and this isn't related to chainmail. This isn't in chainmail, but this week, CISA is hosting its second annual SBOM-A-Rama. I might be wrong on that. It might be more than second. Out in Colorado, and obviously you're not at it. You're at home. I'm not at it, but other people are at it. Actually sold out in person, and it's going to be available. You can register to attend remotely.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and we will share a link with that. We'll push it out on LinkedIn. When we put
I was looking for that last night, so I'm glad that because I saw it and I didn't have time to look and see if it was going to be virtual or not, or if we could jump on, because I did look at some of the sessions and some of them are very interesting and I want to hear them.
So I'm interested in your thoughts. What would you like to see? What questions you think they need to answer at SBOM-A-Rama, and what, now that I think the concept of an SBOM is pretty well established now. What do you think needs to get done in the next year?
I think for me personally, the big thing is always, how do you keep an SBOM up to date? What are the recommendations? When does it get old? How do you know it's stale? And then of course, even if it is fresh, what are we starting to build some best practices around how to use it to help us mitigate, how to use it to help us make actionable decisions? Because I still feel like when I talk to people and they tell me I need an SBOM, I have to have an SBOM, and I ask them why do you need an SBOM, and they're like, because so and so told me so. That's always their answer. It's not, I
Yeah.
need it because I'm using it to do these things.
Yeah.
It's I was told I needed it. And that's
Very
scary. So
compliancy sounding.
yeah,
Yes.
it's always around compliance. So I'm really interested because I saw these sessions, and some of these sessions are really around how do you use the SBOM to protect X, or how do you use the SBOM to fix Y. So that's why I'm very interested in seeing it, because I want to see how they're doing it, what tools they're using, if it's all homegrown or if there's best practices, etc. So very interested in seeing that. And it's funny, I also saw it was in chainmail that SBOM is now mandated, and
By the
I
military.
actually found
Yeah.
that surprising, because
Yeah.
I already thought it was. From my government
Yeah.
work that I did, I was always told we had to have one all the time, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. So
Right.
surprised that it must have been our organization
So
required
it
not.
was in that executive order, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, again, that doesn't have the force of legislation and so
Yeah.
on. And there are lots of asterisks of like, oh, if you can't provide one, maybe we'll give you a waiver, or you can. So a lot of asterisks, a lot of small print about SBOMs are required. And again, this is only in the government space. It's not in the rest of our $26 trillion economy. So, but I think you're right. And I don't think that's an accident. My sense is, and I've gone to a lot of these kind of SBOM meetings that happen weekly, that the community itself and CISA, NIST, and so on is very aware of the potential of this to become just a checkbox compliance thing, and to lose the force of, no, these need to be actionable documents that are actually informing you and empowering you. So I think they're very aware of that. And I think that's why there are these sessions kind of focused on making them actionable, using them operationally.
Yeah. And I also want to see this. The other thing, I want to see what SBOMs we're talking about. Are we talking about containers? Are we talking about software? Are we talking about VMs? There are so many bombs now, and we don't want to open that whole the X-bomb. The X-bomb. Yeah, there's a crypto bomb. There's a cipher. There's all crypto, like that kind of crypto encryption.
Yeah.
There's several different bombs that are out there, and that was the other thing I wanted to see, is which ones they're going to talk about and which ones they're recognizing, I guess, as the ones that are useful right now.
Okay, so we will share a link so you can register if you're interested. And with that, Knox, I would like to say thank you so much for coming on and chatting. We will have to do this again. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, always a good time, Paul.
I feel like more informed and smarter than I did 15 minutes ago.
Well, I just enjoy talking to you, Paul. It's just a great time.
Same here. All right. Hey, man, thanks so much.
All right, see ya.